All right, we got lots of folks joining us, so everyone just sort of hang tight. Right now, this is a Zoom webinar, so if you can't use your microphone or your video, that is expected and correct. Everything is fine. We'll let you know how to ask questions or raise your hand if you need some help in just one moment. All right. The people coming in is starting to stabilize. So in order to get all the questions we're going to have in, I think let's go right ahead. So, all right. All right.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for this informational webinar regarding DEQ's decision documents for the 2020 core nationwide permits. I'm Sarah Slater. I'm the statewide 401 Dredge and Fill Program Coordinator, and I'm joined today by Haley Teach, our statewide nationwide certification specialist. But first, I'm going to briefly turn it over to Lauren Wurtis, our Northwest Region Public Affairs Specialist, to discuss the specifics of this Zoom webinar.
Thanks, Sarah. So as she said, my name's Lauren, and I'm just going to run us through just Zoom 101 for the webinar. So right now you'll either be hearing this audio through your computer, or if you decide to call in by phone, you can do that as well. And as I mentioned, as folks were just coming on, note that you're not able to speak unless the host enables your audio. So if you do have a question, there is this toolbar along the bottom. You can enter things in through the chat, through the Q&A, or if you'd like to ask your question out loud, you're more than welcome to raise your hand and then I can unmute you. We're going to be taking questions at the end of the presentation, but you're more than welcome to send them in via chat as they occur to you. If you are joining us via phone today, press *9 to raise your hand and I will unmute you and let you know that you're ready to speak. So with that, I'll turn it back over.
Thanks, Lauren. So just a few things before we get started. I just wanted to mention that there were some big process changes this time around for the nationwides. First, the Corps generally issues their nationwide permits every 5 years. Because of federal initiatives, the Corps is going through this process 2 years early. So the last nationwide cycle was in 2017. In addition, states and tribes are usually given a year or more to review and evaluate the nationwide package before making decisions. This time around, the time frame has been around 3 months, again, due to initiatives from the federal level. I just wanted to acknowledge the condensed time frame. And lastly, we're issuing our decision based on draft documents. The national and regional conditions will not be finalized until after our certification decision. This is a change from the past where we had issued our decision based on the final core nationwide package. Next slide, please. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we'll talk about what a nationwide is, DEQ's draft decision documents, DEQ changes to what types of projects will be considered under our expedited 401 certification, and finally, how you can comment on DEQ's draft documents. Next slide, please. So what is a nationwide permit? The nationwide permits, these are general permits issued by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on a nationwide basis for activities having minimal impacts on the environment. The Corps issues a nationwide permit package with national conditions, and the local Corps district, the Portland district, has regional conditions placed on the nationwides. DEQ must issue water quality certification in order for applicants to move forward under the nationwide program for most categories. DEQ reviews and evaluates the construction and operation of projects relative to state water quality standards. For the 2020 nationwide package, there are 57 categories proposed. As I mentioned earlier, nationwide permits are generally issued every 5 years, but this has been moved up this time around. Next slide, please. So DEQ's decision document. So we are planning on processing the nationwide package just as we did in 2017. That is, we will deny the nationwide package and issue individual 401 certification for most nationwides. As I mentioned, there are 57 categories of nationwides. and how DEQ intends to process these categories is outlined in our decision document that is currently out on public notice. Some categories do not need any certification, and some categories will qualify for an expedited certification. In general, for most categories, if an applicant receives a nationwide permit from the Corps, DEQ will issue an expedited 401 certification. Projects that don't receive expedited certification will have to go through the standard individual process. We're not going to go through each of the 57 categories today, but as I mentioned, they are part of the package currently on public notice, and we'll share the web link toward the end of the webinar. You'll have an opportunity to provide public comment or ask questions. Next slide, please. I think one up, Lauren.
Is that right?
Yep. Let me make sure. Yes, okay, sorry about that. So DEQ's decision document. As we did in 2017, we are going to be issuing certification directly to the applicant, and we'll continue to require post-construction stormwater management. In addition, one of the core proposed changes to the nationwide is that the federal agencies do not need to submit a pre-construction notification to the Corps prior to doing work. As I mentioned, the Corps documents we were reviewing are draft documents, so we don't know if this will be the case in the final nationwide package. Regardless, DEQ will require a 401 review for all federal applicants. Next slide, please. Now I want to talk a little bit about the EPA rule. This rule took effect September 11th, 2020, and affects all projects requiring certification. So it's separate, but it definitely affects how you apply for nationwide projects. We want to highlight a couple elements from a process standpoint and how it affects those nationwide permits. Just as a note, this is a federal rule change, not a state rule change, but DEQ must comply with the federal rule. The first major change is that all applicants, regardless of project type or size, must submit a 30-day pre-filing request to DEQ. An applicant cannot apply for certification until 30 days after the pre-filing request. On this slide is a link to where you can find information regarding the pre-filing. We do have a web-based form on our website to fill out some basic information, and the information will be sent directly to DEQ. And this will be available later, so if you don't have a chance to write down this website, that's fine. Next slide, please. And then the other big change with the EPA rule is what constitutes a valid certification request. There's a lot of information here on this slide. I'm not going to read through all of this information, but all of the 9 bullet points are required to be submitted for requests to be valid. Additionally, this request must be given to DEQ and the Corps concurrently. Some of these items may already be in your joint permit application or in your pre-construction notification. It's helpful for us to determine if all information is complete, if you can either submit these specific 9 bullet points separately from the normal application, or let us know where in the application we can find the information. We do find sometimes we're fishing through several appendices, it can be really hard to find the specific information, but providing that information up front to us will help us process your applications faster. Next slide. And just a little bit about fees. Every project that qualifies for the expedited 401 will be assessed a tier 1 985 fee. This is our lowest fee. And again, this is the exact same structure that we've been following since 2017. There are no exemptions to the fee, either for restoration projects or emergency projects, no exemptions. And next slide. And just a little bit about timing. Again, this is the same way we did it in 2017. We try to get these turned around in around 30 days after a complete application is received, which includes your LOCs and your complete post-construction stormwater management plan if required, or after payment is received, whichever is longer. And again, projects that don't qualify for the expedited 401 certification will need a standard 401 individual certification, which will have a higher fee and will take more time. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Haley Teach to discuss some of the detailed information in the expedited 401 certification template, which is included in the decision documents currently out on public notice.
Thanks, Sarah.
Hi everyone, my name is Haley Teach and I'm the 401 Water Quality Specialist for nationwide projects statewide. If you're going through a nationwide permitting process with the Corps, I'm the DEQ 401 reviewer. So I'll be starting with some general conditions added to the proposed 401 certification and then discussing permit category specific changes. The current 2017 401 certification template is on our website if you'd like to see what we have right now. So a statement was added to the beginning of the 401 certification template about the duration of the certification for better clarification. The 401 water quality certification is valid for the duration of the Corps 404 permit. Some language changes and updates were made to the erosion and sediment control condition to better match the language and our other DEQ certifications. This doesn't change the overall substance of the erosion and sediment control condition. Again, just more language updates. For turbidity monitoring, we have removed the phrase daily hours from when monitoring needs to occur, since some construction schedules happen at night. A clarification about turbidity monitoring logs has also been added. Turbidity monitoring logs must be kept on file for the duration of the permit cycle. DEQ may also request turbidity monitoring records at any time during or after construction. Next slide, please. 2 new general conditions were added for projects that propose construction. Deleterious waste materials prohibits placing biologically harmful materials and construction debris in locations where they could enter waters of the state. This includes petroleum products, chemicals, cement cured less than 24 hours, sandblasted materials, chipped paint, asphalt, etc. All of the materials I just mentioned and some of the others are listed in the certification condition. The added previously contaminated soil and groundwater condition informs applicants that if any contaminated soil or groundwater is encountered during construction, it must be handled and disposed of properly, and DEQ's environmental cleanup section must be notified. Next slide, please. So not much has changed with the post-construction stormwater guidance from the 2017 certification. Language has been added about DEQ's compliance authority. If a facility design changes, DEQ should be notified, and DEQ has the authority to request corrective actions if facilities are not built to plan. Next slide. Okay, so we are going to move ahead to category specific changes. Because of the compressed timelines, we are still evaluating some of these conditions and welcome feedback on all of them. The Corps added 5 new nationwide permit categories this year, and DEQ has made changes to 6 existing category conditions. The 2020 nationwide permits have changed category 12 from utility lines to oil and natural gas pipeline activities. DEQ will now require standard individual certification for nationwide 12 projects. The DEQ threshold for nationwide 29 and 39, which are residential and commercial projects, has also changed. Standard individual certifications will now be required for projects that create or replace 5,000 square feet of impervious surface and or if there's more than 300 linear feet of stream bed loss. Next slide, please. Nationwide 42 for recreational facilities has a new threshold. A project will require a standard individual certification review by DEQ if there's more than 300 linear feet of stream bed loss. Nationwide 48 has changed from existing commercial shellfish aquaculture activities to commercial shellfish mariculture activities. The Corps is no longer requiring a pre-construction notification for this nationwide permit category. However, we are still evaluating the thresholds and welcome input. Nationwide 48 does not require a 401 water quality certification review at this time. Next slide, please. DEQ previously required a standard individual certification for nationwide 53 removal of lowhead dams. Projects now may be reviewed under our expedited review process for nationwide permits as long as they coordinate first with PSET, which is the Portland Sediment and Evaluation Team, if there will be sediment dispersion. Newly proposed nationwide categories A, seaweed mariculture, and B, finfish mariculture, will be reviewed under an expedited 401 certification. However, these activities require Section 10 permitting only review at this time, and they don't typically require a 401. So we're still evaluating this as well. Next slide, please. Like I said earlier, nationwide 12 has changed from general utility lines to only covering oil and natural gas activity. Proposed category C covers utility lines for electric and telecommunication activity, for example, electricity and internet. Category D covers water and other substances, for example, potable water, wastewater, sewage, stormwater. DEQ will review electric and telecommunication activity under a nationwide. For projects that propose HDD installation, DEQ will require standard individual review. All other utility activities will be under an expedited 401 review. Proposed nationwide E is for water reclamation and reuse facilities. Activities under this nationwide coverage include the construction, expansion, or maintenance of water reclamation and reuse facilities. DEQ will review this under an expedited 401 certification. Now Sarah's going to talk about some opportunities for public participation.
Thank you, Haley. So as I mentioned, we are issuing our decision based on draft documents. Your input is so valuable as we continue to internally evaluate various categories and decisions. So we are right now in the middle of a 30-day public comment period, which began on November 3rd. Written comments are due at 5 p.m. on December 8th. You can find the public notice here on this web link. And again, these will all be available to you after the webinar. And we will have an official public hearing at 6 p.m. on December 1st, also on Zoom. And how to comment, you can comment verbally at that Zoom public hearing we're having. You can send an email to our 401 public comments inbox, and you can also snail mail us at the address on the slide. And with that, that's the end of our informational webinar. If you have questions, feel free to contact Haley or me anytime. If you don't want to ask a question here and you just want to give us a call and ask us, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to talk through some of these things with you. So I think now we can open it up to questions.
All right.
And Lauren, I think you're facilitating this portion.
Yes.
Okay.
So I saw someone had a hand raised earlier. Yeah. Oh, and still. So Arlene, I am going to unmute you. If you hit your own unmute button, there you go.
Hi there. Yeah, this is Arlene from ODFW. Thanks for the presentation. So my questions, I was a little fast trying to keep up, but my questions had to do with what you were saying around nationwide 48A and B and DEQ's role in the permitting process for that, or lack of permitting for those mariculture permits. I wasn't quite sure what you were saying about 48. If you're saying that it is no longer, there's a rule change regarding 48 where you no longer are required to issue a permit, water quality permit, could you? And then I had questions about A and B.
So we base our, and Haley jump in anytime, we base our certifications, how we process them typically on some of the core decisions. For 48, and with any of these, if there's no pre-construction notification required, we generally don't do a 401 certification on those projects. So that was our decision behind that. Again, we're definitely open to comments, suggestions, thoughts, so please provide those to us. And then as far as the A and B.
Can I ask a follow-up question,
sure.
please?
Sure.
So what's the rationale for that? Because as you know, we're concerned about the Corps yanking the PCN requirement for permits, and the state comment is that, you know, we think a PCN should be required for nationwide 48. If they go ahead with, you know, if they adhere to what they're proposing and they pull the requirement for the PCN, where is the process for oversight over potential new projects under 48?
I think that's a great question. Definitely, please, you know, submit that question to us. You know, I don't know what to expect in the future. I think we had one for the last cycle, and it was a Section 10 only. So we don't see them very often.
I don't know. Do you mean Section 10 ESA Section 10?
No, I'm sorry. Section 10 is the Corps' Rivers and Harbors Act.
Okay, that's, yeah, it's a jargon I'm not familiar with.
Sorry,
So
yeah. in section, so what the 401 programs is, we certify section 404 permits, and that's the dredge and fill permits with the Corps. We do section 10 permits in Portland Harbor, and that's pretty much the only place we do section 10 permits. So anywhere else where it's section 10 only, we typically don't do section 401 water quality certification. So I don't know if that answers your question, but definitely, it's something, like I said, and Haley mentioned, we're still working through this process. But historically, if there was not a PCN required, we would not have required a 401 certification.
Okay.
And so that's where it's the draft document. That's why we made that decision for the draft document.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I'm just not versed in the 401, 404, or whatever language. So I will pass that on internally. Steve Rumrell couldn't be on the call today. And then my questions for A and B. You mentioned an expedited 401 certification as opposed to an individual certification. I'm just curious how that decision is made, whether or not it meets the qualifications for an expedited certification versus a non-expedited version.
And to be honest, so A and B right now are proposed, the Corps is proposing to only do those under Section 10 Rivers and Harbors Act. So as it stands now, we likely wouldn't even do a 401 certification. But again, we're trying to, because these are draft documents, we know those things could change. So we're trying to kind of put some caveats in there for just in case they do end up doing them under Section 404. But we do look at the core threshold in their draft documents, and that's how we make our decisions.
Okay, and so the fact that we are developing coastal zone consistency enforceable policies, does that mean that comments to enforceable policies, does that mean that you're not, that you think that DEQ is outside of having to comment under coastal zone for the enforceable policies? We
haven't in the past. I think we can talk more offline about that.
Okay.
It's not something that we've done before, but certainly happy to have a conversation about that.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
That's all I had.
Thanks, Arlene.
All right. So next question we have, where can we find out for the nationwides that you didn't mention?
So those are what's on public notice now. So we do have the website on the slides, and like I said, we'll make that available later. You can also just Google like DEQ public notices, and you'll see the big list of public notices, and you'll see the nationwide public notice. Click on that, and it's going to have the draft decision document, which is essentially the denial document, and it goes through all the categories, and then it will have the certification template on how we all the conditions we plan on having on the nationwides or on the expedited 401s.
Perfect. And I sent the link to the public notice page out through the chat, so folks should have that. How do these new rules apply to individual core permits?
So the new EPA 401 rule that I talked about, like I said, it's a completely separate item, but they do overlap because you still have to follow those rules. That's the same for whether you're doing an expedited 401 or an individual 401. So that is the 30-day pre-filing meeting request, submitting those 9 pieces of information after that 30 days, and moving forward from there. And we can provide a link to that federal rule. And we do have some information on our website about that as well.
Great. We have regarding post-construction facilities, how will DEQ determine that a facility does not meet plans? These facilities are usually are built to meet local jurisdiction requirements. Will DEQ be working with the local jurisdictions? Does DEQ plan to conduct inspections of these facilities? So starting with the first question, I can go through again. How will DEQ determine that a facility does not meet plans? for post-construction?
So we do have our post-construction submission guidelines available on our website. So that is what we review against, not necessarily the local conditions. Because you are already working in a sensitive area, we do take probably a closer look at some of those than some of the local guidelines. We do plan on doing some inspections on those. And what we would do is one of the requirements we generally have is to have people submit their as-built plans, or for us to request the as-built plans, and we would take those plans, take them in the field, probably meet with your engineers and walk the site and make sure that you are in compliance. And most people, are generally pretty good, so.
Great, thank you. Our next question, from start to finish, should we expect 60 days, 30 for pre-file, and 30 to issue for a 401 permit? Then is it an additional 30 days for EPA neighboring jurisdiction determination? So 90 days total. Does that sound right?
Yes, I don't want to speak for that last 30 days because I do believe that the Corps and EPA are having some conversations about that. But definitely, yes, the first 30 days for the pre-filing, and then the subsequent 30 days for us to do our review and get all the information needed.
And in addition, on that same question, any discussion on EPA doing the neighboring jurisdiction determination during the pre-filing?
As far as I know, we have not been part of those discussions.
Great. Is DEQ changing their fees to individual permits?
No, those will be the same. All the fees are still the same.
Great, thank you. Is this presentation on your website? So I can answer that one. In fact, so it's going to be on the Section 401 dredge and fill page. Essentially, if you Google DEQ, Section 401 dredge and fill, it should take you right there. And we will be posting a recorded video of this presentation to that page, along with information about how to participate in the public hearing. So you can go there. I'll also send up a follow-out email to all of you who registered with those useful links so that you can go right to them and share them with others. So I appreciate you all attending. All right, and I see another question coming in. The Corps is removing the 300 linear foot threshold for stream bed loss in the 2020 NWPs. What is DEQ's logic for choosing to leave this threshold in place for NWP 2939 and others?
So we determined, so the Corps is changing their threshold to a half acre, I believe. And for small streams, that's a pretty substantial impact. That's DEQ's determination. So we wanted to keep it where it was. And so we kept it at the 300 linear feet. So anything over that 300 linear feet will need a individual review now.
Okay. All right, I don't see any other questions. Last call for questions. As we mentioned, we'll have this posted and we'll send out all of the links to where you can find this information again shortly. All right, I don't see any additional questions coming in. I think you're good.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for attending today. Please keep the questions coming. Just really appreciate your input. Please comment. We do appreciate it. Thank you.